Welcome to week 6 on Luther's Small Catechism. The past couple weeks we've talked about the 10 Commandments, the 3 different parts of the Apostles' Creed, and this week and next week we're going to talk about the Lord's Prayer. So this week we're going to focus on the first part of the Lord's Prayer. But before we get to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about prayer. Every Monday morning, well, almost every Monday morning, I get out my tuba here, and I sit down and I go through my normal warm-ups, but then I play through some of my favorite hymns. And as I play through my hymns, I read the text, and I pray those texts. And that's kind of how I pray each week, specifically on Monday morning. It's a time for me to reflect on what God's doing in my life, and a time for me to connect with God as I sing. You know, St. Augustine used to say, he who sings prays twice. And so I think of it as kind of singing through my tuba. So that's kind of how I pray. But the more I think about prayer, it's such a complex thing. And for me, it's helpful to break it down into a basic structure, if you will. So one way we can break down prayer is into kind of a fourfold shape. So the first part of that shape is addressing God. Who is God? Who are we praying to specifically? And then the second part of that is, what is God capable of doing? The third part of that is our petition. What are we asking for from God? And then the fourth part of that prayer has to do with, how is that going to be accomplished? And if you look close enough, you can see that structure in the Lord's Prayer. So we're just going to focus on the first part of the Lord's Prayer today. Our Father in heaven. This doesn't mean that God's high above there, but this means that God's at home waiting for us, if you will. And God is ready to act from heaven, where everything is just wonderful. Hallowed be your name. That's not Old English, that we don't have any meaning for it. We still use it. And we use it to talk about how special God's name is. Our Father in heaven, whose name is so sacred and special to us. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We talked about heaven in the first part of the prayer. Heaven, this glorious place. Let that be the realization for how we experience life right now. And then we get to that part about the prayer where I said, petition, give us today our daily bread. And that doesn't just mean food and bread, especially for those who are gluten-free. It means everything. It means my tuba here. It means the piano. It means my home. It means my clothing. It means my family. That bread, that stuff that gives us sustenance, that stuff that gives us life. So that's kind of the way we can break down the Lord's Prayer, at least the first part. So this week, I'd invite you to think about that fourfold shape. Addressing God. What is God capable of doing? Petitioning, asking God for something, and then thinking about, how is God capable of doing that? How is that going to happen through God? And so I invite you to pray, and then I'm curious, what are you praying for this week? So if you would, I'd invite you to post here on YouTube or on Facebook and share with some of us, what are the things that you're praying for? Well, if you excuse me, I think I'll do some of my praying now. You're welcome to stay and listen if you want. We'll see you back here next week. Take care.